we're in a really weird place right now with some of the characters. We don't know exactly, obviously, the full extent of, say, where Mashima plans to put Lucy or Wendy. Both of them are looking really powerful right now. A lot of untapped potential. Obviously, Wendy's got her whole Enchantress bit. But with Lucy, she's got her Stardust mix. Who knows? She can even go up to 3 combination keys, or eventually have all of them. Like, there's a lot more possibilities now that she has that. It's similar to Urza now that she has the ability to enchant levels of spells into her weapons, which pretty much gives her the ability to, is like, anytime she can learn just a fundamental grasp on a magic. Say she learns giant magic from Makarov. She doesn't have to master it, but if she can use it to one thing, and it's like, oh yeah, I put it in the sword, and then when I swing it, it enlarges right when I, make the swing. Or something around that, where it is just a process of, yeah, I don't have to have it mastered, I just have to know how to do it, and then just enough to put it into my sword to use my weapon how I want to. Which, again, I don't imagine is that kind of crazy or complicated, especially if you only, set on one specific spell. But out of them, because, I can't really use Natsu. Natsu's the obvious main character, obvious stuff going on with him and Ignia. But the one that people have brought up continuously over 100 Years Quest, and to a degree I can agree with, is Gray. Because, again, the weird thing about Gray is not that Gray is, Gray hasn't suddenly become, the weakest out of the group. He's not suddenly somebody who just, is a pushover or can't do anything. The problem is, when you compare him to the other characters in 100 Years Quest, pretty much everybody else in the main cast, they all have something that they are advancing on. Something about their abilities, something that they are showing growth with. Again, Wendy has her enchanting abilities. Lucy has the new stuff with her Stardust mixes. Urza's got her enchanting stuff. Natsu even now has the ability to pretty much combine Fire and Dragon King mode and Dragon Force to a degree for, high levels of defense and reaction ability. There's good stuff for all of them, and Gray just hasn't had anything like that, and that's been the weirdest thing for me for him, because it's not like he's just been there. Gray's had a lot of stuff for his character and a lot of personal growth and a lot of personal development, but he's lacking a lot of it when it comes to combat. And obviously, character growth and their writing is very important, but there is a very strong degree of importance when it comes to strength and power levels and stuff in a fighting series when it comes to levels of relevancy. It's not like, say, Lax's Guild Arts or somebody like that, where they could come in, we already know they're pretty powerful, time skip, you can kind of say they got, X, Y, or Z stronger, easily could pull out some new moves without anything being crazy, but Gray's part of the main cast, and we haven't really seen that same degree of growth for him. There hasn't really been anything to really look at and be like, wow, he's made a giant step in this area. The most we can really see is just a better degree on just general ice make. He's got some dynamic ice make, having them able to be moved, but nothing that's too crazy. And I think that one of the things that everybody's waiting for is Gray to get some advancement in his devil slaying form, some form of progressed devil or demon form that he can have. My big thing right now is, one, I'm definitely on board with that, but there's a current question mark right now in the story and for the series that I think potentially could be telling us a bit about stuff with Gray. So far, again, really, when you look at the other characters, don't just look at who they fought, what they fought. Look at the context of when they were unveiling or gaining a better grasp on these abilities. We first saw Stardust mix back in Drasil, similar to when we saw Urza's new swords, but we didn't see her directly enchant them, but we knew of them. Stuff like that. Whereas with Gray didn't really get anything fancy and new in that arc. The only thing we really had was him just use the pure physical increase that his Devil Slayer side is given. He didn't really use Ice Make or anything like that, or even use Ice Devil abilities when he fought the Thunder Legion. Whereas later, it's like, okay, he's got a Unison Raid moment with Juvia. You have the stuff in Elentier again with his Dynamic Ice Make, and then recently he was using some of Juvia's magic, and then combined them to, Ice Make Cold Slicer, obviously homage to Juvia's Water Slicer. But I'd like to believe that these are all hints towards something. These are all crumbs towards Gray's advancement. Because the first time, it's like, okay, cool, Gray's just using his devil abilities. He's exploring not using the ice side, but using specifically the physical prowess and the increase that just this slight demonic transformation gives. With when it came to Hakune, it was like, okay, he's using a higher level of degree of just what he has in general. Nothing really shiny and new other than just a bit bigger and better. Nothing outstanding. Nothing kind of like he's now developed. Like, one of the things I've always like had an idea is like, what if he took the True Ice arrows that he copied from Invul and he used that as a weapon? Like, he had True Ice arrows, so he can just pretty much snipe somebody with a durability voiding arrow. Something like that, where it'd be like, wow, that's really crazy. You know, that's a huge, dangerous addition to his arsenal. Or you know, something like that. It could easily just be a higher level of devil slaying. Like I said, get some horns, maybe a new ability. But I think that what we've been given, again, I can't say for sure, but I think that it gives us, at least connecting the points, that it makes enough sense to build up a potential big growth point for Gray. Because, one, before I go into that, Mashima did say, I think it was in a recent Twitter space or an interview, that when they were talking about the strength of Gray to Natsu, he said that they were about equal. He said that Gray is as strong as Natsu. I don't think he meant in total. Like, there's no shot that, like, even peak Gray is even close to the Natsu that fought that went against Mercephobia. But generally, I would assume that by standard powers, what they can kind of just utilize offhand. Dragon Force is different, but Gray does have lost aspects, so like that's his way, I guess, of matching up to that if he needed to. But we can look at it and say, okay, well, what has Gray done recently? What has Gray had that maybe we'll go with this? Because with Mashima, obviously, like, he's way ahead of us. We don't know where he's at in the 100 Years Quest, but I think it's easily safe, again, just to assume that when he says something like that, he has stuff in the future in mind. He has stuff that he's written in his head and he's decided upon, but he doesn't have, like, the concrete event happening canon. It just hasn't happened to the public on the manga format yet. But when you combine that, let's say, like I said, the three first pieces, especially, of Gray having, you know, small advancements, specifically with his devil side, general, larger scale versions of what he's already done, and then lastly, it was, you know, using Juvia's magic. And I think using Juvia's magic, especially with some of the panels, is going to do a lot with Gray. Again, assumption, based off of the fact that it gives him potentially the ability to, like, say, like, know all the water and the atmosphere that's around him that he would have previously known. And I'd be like, okay, well, what if he does something like, instead of just creating ice and attacking with it, he just starts freezing the area, similar to, like, Ice Makes Silver, but instead of be like how Natsu, when he's just, like, fully blazed up and he gets step, you know, he's just emitting heat around him. If Gray did that with cold, not I'm gonna freeze something, it's just being around him is freezing. Like, it's a passive, just off, just go. And I think that'd be something really cool to do with, like, a progressed devil form, where it's like he steps and it's like you just see an area that's frozen, and, you know, he steps back, the area behind him starts freezing, and it's just like there's like this certain radius of cold that he'll always just output. And maybe even some other cool stuff, like he can, you know, freeze magic, or it, you know, slows thoughts down because of the cold, or something kind of crazy like that. But when you look at that and then look obviously where he's at, I think that there's the strongest bit of, again, at least potential proof in that is when we look at the two guilds right now that have shown up, Diablos and Gold Owl. And I think Gray is really important to that, and I'll give a point at the end. It's something that I think is overall important. I don't want to go too much into it right now. I've talked about it before, but I'll mention it at the end. With Diablos holds a great level of potential for any of the Dragon Slayer characters, because these are characters who obviously are powerful. They have their own obvious, like, skills, abilities, and stuff that I don't think the other characters are going to just be able to run to any point. A Dragon Slayer training with a Dragon Slayer is also going to be a huge bonus, just because Dragon Slayers generally fight so much differently than, obviously, your average wizard. So, you know, any direct head-to-head combat scenarios, I would imagine the best way for a Dragon Slayer to really be pushed and flourish. Because, like, tricky characters is one thing, but, like, it's different when it's somebody that that's matching you for the most part of what you can do, what you specialize in, and you have to kind of really work outside the box instead of like, oh, this is a tricky character who's got some hacks that I got to work around. It's like, no, this guy, if I don't figure out something, he's gonna be, he's just gonna be right up in my face. It's way different than like a ranged caster. But Diablos again holds a lot of potential for the Dragon Slayers. So what's important about Goldel? Very early on, we were even given like little bits about like how Ice Make and Maker Magic has bits to do with alchemy. So now having like straightforward alchemy, and even to the extent where Sai was like thinking that using Juvia's magic was water alchemy, I'm hoping that similar to a potential setup of a training bit with the Diablos members, Gray could get a similar training bit with the Goldal members. And I think that makes a lot of sense because the two people right now that are that were specifically given connections to the Goldal aspects of the story were Gray and Godjill. Godjill's is very clearly a rematch towards God Serena, whereas with Gray, I think Gray's is going to be some form of advancement in his power. Because I think it would be the best for Gray if he ended up, like, if he's not going to get anything like, again, crazy new ice hacks abilities on top of a devil form or anything, if it's going to be something more towards a general increase all around, then I think something like alchemists that are, because Gray's using magic, but one, I would imagine he could learn alchemy, but I think there's a lot of ways that his alchemy could improve his Ice Make magic. Like, he could probably watch them and like think like, oh, I never thought to do that, or doing that just gave me an idea for this different way to use my magic, or something like that. Gray has a lot of general frustration with people, and I understand it, but at the same time, it's one of those things where we can't really say for sure until like the bit is done. I give definite leeway for people with Gray because it's been a long time for us. Like, as the readers, for the people experiencing it in real time, Gray hasn't gotten any like crazy upgrades since. You can really count his fight with Invul, I guess. Like, that's really the last time he got like some form of really, really hype increase. And that was like, 2015? That was a while ago. So it was like 2015, 2016. Definitely a long while ago for Gray. But I have my hopes up. I think it makes a lot of sense for Gray to get stronger, and especially with the comments from Mashima saying that he's as strong as Natsu. I don't think that's just him saying stuff. I think it would make sense because logically the only person that can stop Natsu if he goes out of control again is, besides Lucy, because Lucy seems to, the unconfirmed connection that we're just waiting on, and then Gray because Devil Slaying. So we'll see. I think Gray needs to be strong enough to, like, if Natsu goes out of control, that he needs to be able to step in and do something. It's just one of those things we'll have to wait on. I'm very curious as to how it's going to go with him, because Gray overall has had a really good track record throughout the series, and he's been, a fan favorite for a lot of people. It's only really been until 100 Years Quest that I think that he's taken, like, a little bit of a back burner seat. But again, I think that's just one of those things where, for Mashima, he doesn't really notice the time because he's not looking specific. It's like the people who specifically want Gray to get upgrades and spotlight and stuff, they're feeling it specifically because they're waiting for Gray. Whereas like Mashima, I don't think he's thinking like that. He's probably thinking more of like, oh yeah, well, Gray's not getting these big things fight wise, but he's getting these important things for his character and whatnot, and he has stuff I would imagine planned out for the future. So we'll see. It's just gonna be those waiting game things. It's a little rough. I think there's enough crumbs right now to build a good enough case for Gray that it's like, yeah, I could see this happening. This seems likely, and it's just going to be one of those times where it's just going to take a panel where he's like, oh yeah, I'll go after and investigate them or something that really puts him right up with Goldal. Maybe once they get questioned, he'll want to go see them or something. Some form of way to get Gray out there, because I think that the alchemy stuff is not a coincidence. They were a really weird introduction to this arc, but I think it would make sense if you had a Dragon Slaying Guild to help the Dragon Slayers, but it's like, well, what am I going to do with the, because Gray is the rival. He's not, like, obviously, like, as heavy rival as Sasuke or, or Bakugo or Kaiba or anybody, where it's like, being the rival is their primary thing. Gray is, like, a rival secondary. Like, he's a rival to Natsu, but the rival is not the focus. But I think it would make sense if Mashima is planning to do stuff with, like, getting the Dragon Slayer stronger through Diablos eventually, then he's going to need something for Gray. Because he can't just turn Gray... Well, he could turn Gray into a Dragon Slayer. I don't think he would. I think a way to advance Gray in the best way, again, would be to do something fundamental. Do something that its core would just be a way larger thing. Like, imagine it's like, oh, Ice make Freeze Lancer, just for an imagine. The same looking attack. But it's like, it's clearly colder around it, and like, the area that they travel is freezing. Like, instead of it just being, the ice lance flying towards something, everything around it is getting frozen. Like, it goes near, ground, water, an arrow, a bullet, a spell. They just freeze everything in path, essentially. If Gray can do something like that, I think that'd be great. Because Natsu, this is the last thing, Natsu has that. Like, he can pretty much just auto-burn magic that is so much lower. Like, he has a trash hammer essentially for wizards. He'll just be like, yeah, your spell's burnt, it's gone, it's too weak. I think Gray should have an equivalent to that, where it's like, if your spell is just so kind of like when Gray shot his ice arrow at Hakune and it froze before it got there. I think Gray should have a level of that. I don't think it should just work on everybody, but I think there should be a degree of just passively, and like if him and Scoleon fought, I think Scoleon at this point, Scoleon's lower level attack should just be frozen at Gray, where it's like he has to fight seriously, if we ever get that fight. But anyway, other than that, comment below, thumbs up the video, friend the like button, subscribe button, check out my other videos. But than that, appreciate it. Subscribe, and thank you all for listening. Bye.